Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your guest co-host, Andrew Gombis. Today, we're going to be talking about UFC 298. Alexander the Great Volkanovski taking on Ilia El Matador Topuria for the UFC Featherweight Championship of the World. And my friends, it's going down this Saturday night live at the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. You got the pound-for-pound great Alex Volkanovski taking on an undefeated challenger who's brimming with confidence. And honestly, Andrew, I think this is one of the best title fights, not just of this year, but of the last 5 years.
I agree. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm really looking forward to diving into this card with you. But yeah, in regard to the main event title fight, I can't remember the last time I've been this excited for the 145-pound belt to be put on the line. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about it later.
Well, Andrew, let's not even waste any time at all. Let's get right down to business, because in the main event, and real quick, my last show, a lot of people were giving me shit about how I don't start with the first fight and I start with the main event. And I was thinking about, what was the first fight of the night last week? It was like a really low level fight. It was
I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
Was it Marcos versus Aori was the first fight?
Sorry, I'm thinking of the week before when it was Jamal Pogues versus Thomas Peterson. So
yeah.
I was like, sorry, I didn't talk about Jamal Pogues and Thomas Peterson before I talked about an epic main event. Like, my bad, right? Like, y'all would rather hear about that. But let's get right down to business, man, because in this main event, we got the champ, Alexander Volkanovski, one of the pound-for-pound greats. He's 26-3. He's taking on the undefeated challenger, Ilia Topuria, who's 14-0. And currently, they got it. It just depends where you look. You know, there's been a lot of action coming in both ways. But right now, as we sit here recording this on Tuesday, it's Alexander minus 135. The comeback on Ilia Topuria is plus 115. So, man, so many different ways to look at it. For example, when's the last time you're going to get a price like this on Volk? Well, actually, his last fight, he was a plus 200 dog. So let's already debunk that myth. But man, just looking at it stylistically, it's incredible. Volk really innovated a lot of things in this game. For example, his feinting game is so world class. He's got guys mesmerized out there, and he's so well rounded. I mean, you think he's going to punch, that's when he kicks. You think he's going to kick, that's when he punches. You're expecting strikes, he can mix it up with level changes. His submission defense is second to none, as you saw in the Ortega fight. The volume can match and surpass someone like Max Holloway. And the guy's got balls of stone to go up there and challenge Islam Makhachev. Because think about this. Like, a lot of people said, oh, why didn't he take a couple warm-up fights at 55s? Dude, there's no point in that. If you watch Alex's regional scene, go see what he did to Jamie Malarkey, okay? And then tell me with a straight face that he needs some kind of warm-up fight. Like, he was ready, man. It's just that Islam's on a completely different level. And obviously there's weight classes for a reason, but now he's coming back down. And there's the talk about, well, is he coming back too soon from the head kick knockout loss? Andrew, I'm not a doctor, bro. So I'm not going to be the guy that just writes off the great Volkanovski because he got head kicked, you know, a few months ago. And on a side note, an irrelevant fact, both Alexander Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria have both been dropped with head kicks in their career. Difference being was when Alex got dropped with the head kicks, he got knocked out both times. When Ilia got dropped with the head kicks, he actually recovered and finished both those fights. I'm referring to his first fight prior to the UFC, and I'm referring to his fight with Jai Herbert. With Volk, I'm referring to the Islam fight. I'm referring to some fight he had at 170 pounds where he got head kicked. I mean, look, this is irrelevant facts, but I felt like I should bring it up. Here's my thing with this matchup, because that's all that matters at the end of the day, is how they match up stylistically. Right? Like, people talk about how, well, Volk boxed up Max and did all these things. But I'm thinking to myself, you know, these last few guys that Volk have been fighting, amazing fighters, who's been fighting Islam. He's been fighting Max Holloway, Yair, a lot of great fighters. But think about it. What do all those guys have in common? They're all damn near 6 feet tall. Now he's finally going up against that kind of similar body type that he has, that short, stocky, explosive. And let me remind you what happened the last time he fought a guy with this body type, Andrew Gombis. You have to date all the way back to when he fought Chad Mendes, right? And what happened in that fight? It was pretty competitive at times. And Chad Mendes even dropped Volk and almost finished the fight. But you know the deal. Chad Mendes is a gasser. Chad Mendes is, you know, he doesn't have the output or the pace of a guy like Volkanovski. He doesn't have the cardio. He can't go 5 hard. He can throw like a maniac. He can knock anybody out, but he just can't maintain that pace. Whereas a guy like Ilia Topuria, I mean, we already knew he had great grappling coming into the UFC. We knew that he had one-punch knockout power, but that fight he had against Emmett was the fight where I was like, oh, okay, so this guy is a champion level caliber fighter. And the reason I say that, Andrew Gambas, is because the big thing with Volk, one of the big things, you know, the fans and all that, of course, but the output of Volkanovski. Volkanovski is a guy that matched and surpassed the great Max Holloway on output. So it's like, what's Ilya's output like? In that Josh Emmett fight, first of all, he broke a record in terms of scorecards. He got a 50-42, Andrew Gambas, which is something you do not see every single day. And he fought the exact same body type as Volk, and he showed throughout those 5 rounds that he can put up the kind of numbers we want to match that output of Volkanovski, which is a big, big talking point. You know, Yair Rodriguez, he can land very flashy strikes, incredible kicks, spins, you know, that elbow against Korean Zombie. He can do all kinds of flashy stuff, but you know that Yair Rodriguez, his boxing ain't exactly the best. It's more of a kicking type ordeal. You know, with Islam Makhachev, we're more worried about the things that happened in that first fight. The second fight was a surprise. But what happened in that first fight, yes, Volk did better than the odds indicated, but he was still controlled for a majority of that fight. This is a different challenge here. Topuria has the body type that Volk hasn't faced in years, that short, stocky, explosive guy. He can match him on the output. I mean, I think he's a more durable guy. I think he's got more power in his hands. It's just about Volk has a way of confusing guys. Like I said, that feinting game. And one thing I'd be worried about with Topuria being so, you know, into his boxing for MMA, that means he's going to stand heavy on that lead foot. And we know that Volk, incredible leg kicks like you saw in that first Max Holloway fight. So that's definitely going to be part of his game plan. But if you watch the countdown, Gambas, obviously the countdown talk is cheap and all that, but like they were literally showing Topuria talking to his training partners like, you know, throw the low kick and this is what I'm going to counter off of it. So their game plan, they know damn well what they're up against. And another thing, the big talking point about how, well, you know, who the hell is Topuria fought? Let me tell you guys something. I'm sick of that fucking stupid argument. You know why? Because every champion was once a contender. Every contender was once a prospect. Every prospect was once a regional fighter. So when Volk got his big step up against Chad Mendes, against Aldo, you know, prior to that, you know who he had fought? He had beat Darren Elkins and Jeremy Kennedy. So why are we holding it against Topuria? Oh, he beat Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett. Those guys aren't on the level of Volk. Of course, no one's debating that. But this is about rising to the occasion, Andrew Gambas. All our favorite fighters that became champions rose to the occasion. When John Jones fought Shogun, the best guy he had fought up until then was Stephan Bonner and a very green Ryan Bader. So I'm just saying, like, when Conor, you know, when he took his big step up, you know who his fight was right before Chad Mendes? Dennis Seaver. So I'm just saying, man, this whole, oh, he hasn't fought anybody, it's about how the styles match up. And I truly believe this is the toughest matchup that Volk has had in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's as good of a breakdown as you could possibly give. I mean, if you take a look at this fight as a whole, I mean, first of all, let me back up a little bit. If you haven't been following me for a long time, I've bet on Topuria in every single one of his UFC fights leading up to the Josh Emmett fight, and I passed on the Emmett fight because he was already a huge favorite. But it should be no surprise that I'm picking him here. You know, I think it's a changing of the guard. He's much younger. He's taken way less damage. And another point I would like to add on to because everything you said is everything I'm thinking. From the step-ups in competition to the damage to just how well-rounded Topuria is. He's a very, very, very good submission grappler. He's a very good striker, crisp hands. One more thing that I don't like about Volk, not that I don't like about Volk, that I'm concerned about from from his side is that he's bounced up and down between 145 and 155 multiple times now, and he's gotten knocked out at 155. So I think a big weight cut like that, when you've already put on the size to go up to 55, taking it off to go back down to 45, up again, down again, especially at the age he is, like maybe if he was 25 instead of 35, I'd be a little bit more, I'd look past it a little bit easier. But, you know, he was KO'd a few months ago up at 155. He's gone back down to 145 now. He's been pretty open about some of the mental hurdles he's had to go through. And, you know, I wish him all the best in that. I'm not saying that every person, every fighter doesn't go through mental hurdles, but when you're talking about that stuff leading up to a title fight against a straight up killer who's in his prime, I mean, it's just a whole other discussion, especially when, you know, Volkanovski's, he's made his money, you know, he's set, he has his legacy. A lot of people think he's the best featherweight of all time. He went up and tried the 55 thing. He gave Islam a great fight that first time. I just think these two are in such different places in their career, whereas Topuria, you know, he's on the younger side. He still has that undefeated aura, and there's a different confidence level that comes with being undefeated. And Volkanovski has it fresh in his head that he just lost to Makhachev for the second time in a row. Again, not discrediting anything Volk's done. He's had an amazing career. I just think it's at the tail end. I think Ilia gets it done. I actually think he knocks him out on the earlier side.
Yeah, and I don't want to be the guy who, you know, again, like I told you all earlier, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychologist. So as far as is he coming back too soon from a head kick, like knockout loss, I'm not going to be the one to debate that. And not just because I'm not a doctor, Andrew, but because I liked Ilia in this matchup before he got head kick knocked out. So to me, whatever. And then the other thing about him, you know, drinking every day and doing all that, look, obviously, man, it doesn't matter, you know, how strong of a man you are or this or that. We all go through our ups and downs, and I wish Volk nothing but the best. And I'm not going to be the guy to, you know, bring it up, and I'm bringing it up, but I'm not going to be the one to bring it up in terms of using it against him. You know, the guy went through what he went through, and I wish him the best, but all that stuff doesn't give me confidence. But like, I still like Topuria before he got head kick knocked out. I still like Topuria before Volk said he was drinking every single day. And I thought that video he put out about him being old is funny and haha, but like, there's also a little thing about it where it's like, you're not going to see John Jones joking about his demise. You're not going to see. So I don't know. It's like, it was a funny video. It was really well done. Haha. But I don't know. He's kind of foreshadowing what's about to happen, in my opinion. So it's like, when you talk about, you know, what specific areas of the game am I worried about this or that happening? And it's not really like one particular thing I'm worried about. Like, I really think that Topuria can compete anywhere. And we mentioned this already on his regionals and even his UFC debut, which he took on like a couple days notice with the flu. You saw some of his grappling chops. You see that Ryan Hall fight. And I know Ryan Hall, I'm not comparing him to anyone, but I'm just saying, you saw how he came out with the perfect game plan. He didn't try to jump in this guy's guard for his ego to prove that, hey, I'm a better grappler than this guy. No, he found his weakness. He didn't let him get off on his game. And it was time to explode. It was time to explode. Back to the talk of both guys have been dropped with head kicks, but only Topuria has survived those and come back to win the fight. And Volk hasn't been able to. That's not a knock on Volk, but it's more so to say that Topuria isn't just a skilled guy. He also has the heart of a champion. He also has the will to win. And that's so important. So I really think these two are going to go eyeball to eyeball and see who blinks first. And in a situation like that, I got to go with the dog. And then on a separate note, this is not indicative of what might happen. This is not a be all end all, but my history betting this belt has been really spot on. And I plan to continue that here, you know, because when Conor fought Aldo the first time, right? And Aldo, such a legend. I mean, I have a signed WEC Aldo frame picture behind me here. I fucking love Aldo. I mean, I grew up watching Aldo in like my early college days in the WEC. So that's the man. But there's, you know, that cycle of life, right? And basically, what I think is when I bet on Conor to beat Aldo, I max bet Conor to beat Aldo. And it was the exact same shit I'm hearing now. Who has he fought? Oh, but it's the great Jose Aldo. Oh, but he talks too much. Okay, whatever. We got him there. And then you remember what happened. Conor gave up the belt, so they gave Jose that match at UFC 200 against Frankie Edgar. Jose gets the belt back again. Then Jose defends against Max in Brazil. Max was like a plus 100 to plus 110 dog, kind of where Topuria is right now. I max bet Max against Jose in Brazil. Then, you know, I didn't bet him in the rematch because he was like minus 300. But then it was time for Volk to get his title shot. And I bet Volk at like plus 160, plus 170 against Max. Max bet him in the rematch at minus 250, gave me a sweat of all time. So I passed on the third fight. But now I want to continue the evolution of this belt that I've had a great read on. And I think it's time to hand it over. And again, Volk, Hall of Famer. I will never say a bad word about that guy. He changed the game as far as his, because think about this. When's the last time you saw a dude that's 5'6" going out there and jabbing 6 foot tall men like he did against Max, like he did in certain spots standing against Islam? Like, the dude is one of the best of all time, will be a Hall of Famer. It's just simply time to give it to the next generation, and that's all. And I didn't wear a Real Madrid Higuain jersey to pick someone from down under. So all respect to the legendary Volk, but I like Topuria here, and I will be betting him in this spot, possibly large, Gambas.
I like it. Yeah. I think we're in full agreement here.
Is there anything that you feel like I missed? And when I say that, it's not just about building up Topuria's argument, because I don't want anyone to feel like I left out something from Volk or that I'm discrediting Volk, because the regard I hold Volk in is, you know, up here, and me picking against him isn't anything. It's nothing against him. It's just,
it's never personal.
It's really not, bro. Like, it's just the changing of the guard, like you said. And I truly believe it's that time. If it's not, then man, if Volk wins this, he's already one of the all-time greats. But if he wins this, it just takes it to that next level. But like when I saw Topuria's like fights, and you know, obviously they've been looking incredible, but that Emmett fight was the one where I was like, oh, so he looked like a champion. Like, I get it that Emmett, like, people make it seem like, I heard someone talking about how, oh, this is the Hermanson Pfeiffer situation. No, it's not, dog. Like, Pfeiffer had only fought Razak, who I respect, and Amadovsky, who and then he fought fucking Jack Hermanson. That is a massive step up. Whereas Emmett might not be a champion, but Emmett still holds the record for most knockdowns in featherweight history. Ilia went 5 rounds with him and beat him 50-42, which is simply unheard of. And not to mention, Emmett's a perennial top 5, top 10 guy. So to compare that step up to the step up that Pfeiffer took is just asinine as far as I'm concerned. So I just don't view it like that, Gambas.
Yeah, and even Mitchell's ranked 10th, which, I mean, he finished that fight in the second round.
Sorry. And how did he finish that fight? He submitted the guy, like, where we thought, oh, this is his big advantage. Nope, you submitted him. So,
well, it's hilarious because you hear Joe Rogan say right before he submits him, he's like, something along the lines of, oh, I don't know if he wants to go down there on the mat with Mitchell. And then he just ran through him on the mat too. And just one last thing. I know we've said everything there is to say about this fight, but there's the whole, 35 or older narrative, where a lot of people are like, oh, if you're 35 in a title fight, it's going to go bad for you. And I just want to say that I don't like, has pretty much nothing or almost nothing to do with why I'm making this bet. Like, if Volk was fighting like Yair, for example, I would be picking him even if he was 35. Like, I picked Pennington against MBS, and Pennington's 35. So there is no like one size fits all approach to this. Like, it's not like, oh, he's 35, so he's going to lose. I just think that's one of the million different talking points you could look at with this fight. And I'm not saying it's not an advantage for Topuria to be a lot younger and having taken a lot less damage, having a lot less miles on him, but it's just one of like a million factors. So there's definitely no one size fits all. You could take the betting in general, and definitely not with something like that.
Exactly. My arguments are not Volk's age, not Volk coming off a knockout loss, not Volk talking about being an alcoholic. Like, hey, it doesn't hurt, right, my stance, but I already had Topuria prior to all of that. So to me, it's about how they match up stylistically. And I think this guy might have the tools to get it done. Again, when people talk about, well, he outboxed Max, it's a different body type. Max is one of those guys that'll eat a million shots and he's still there. You get discouraged, you slow down, and then he fucking puts it on you. But the thing is, guys like Topuria and Volk are a lot faster than Max with that kind of 5'6", 5'7", short, stocky, explosive frame. It's just a different matchup, man. And last time we saw Volk against this body type, he did get floored. It's just, Chad's one of those gassing assassins. You know what I mean? He doesn't have the pace or the output Topuria does, as proven in his last fight. So we can go on about it. I just don't want anyone to feel like I'm discrediting the great Volk, or that I'm leaving any convenient details out or any bullshit like that, because I really want it to be like a straightforward, non-biased, I'm wearing a Spain jersey, but non-biased, opinion, because we do love Volk. So yeah. And new. So co-main event of the evening in the middleweight division, we got Robert the Reaper Whittaker. He's 24-7, taking on Paulo Bohachinia Costa, who's 14-2 currently. Andrew, they got it. Robert Whittaker -225. The comeback on Paulo Bohachinia is +190. So here's what's interesting, man. I felt like the Paulo that fought Yoel Romero, I felt like that guy was destined for great things, because you look at that body type, and originally the first guy with that body type was Yoel Romero. Kind of just looks like a real Greek god and is well-rounded, can do everything. And now, skip forward a few years, watch out for this kid Vitor Petrino, because I think he's the new, Yoel Romero, Paulo Costa type guy. But I digress. Felt like Paulo Costa, after that Yoel fight, he got a little carried away. The Israel Adesanya debacle happened. What's funny? I know you've heard about him drinking wine the night before, but have you heard like the details? So basically, after his weight cut, he couldn't sleep, right? So he's like, fuck it, maybe if I drink a couple glasses of wine, then I'll pass out. But sometimes when you drink, it keeps you up. So this guy had the intention of drinking a little, like a glass or two of wine so I can pass out. And then it kept him up all night. So, and he just looked fucking terrible. And then that fight with Vettori, I thought it was a great fight, but he was still pulling stunts, I remember the famous quote, something about how like, dude, we agreed to 185 and you want to fight at 205. And Paulo's like, that sounds like a personal problem. That shit had me dying, dude. But then the Luke Rockhold fight coming back like a year later off a big layoff, up in elevation in Salt Lake City, and breaks his hand. So it wasn't the best look. But here's what I want to say. To give Paulo some credit, his confidence was down in the dumps losing those two fights, right? He got embarrassed badly by Izzy. The stunt he pulled against Vettori, despite it being a great fight, I feel like he just kind of needed to get a win under his belt to like be like, hey, I do still belong. And if that is kind of the launching point to get him back to the guy that fought Yoel Romero, I think the guy that fought Yoel Romero beats Robert Whittaker at these +190 odds. It's just that if we're getting the lazy, but he doesn't look lazy. You've seen the, again, social media, whatever, but you've seen the pictures. He looks like that ripped guy that took it seriously this time, that's coming out to make a statement, because I think that guy can win. And I think that these odds are too wide if I get that guy. It's a guessing game. Am I getting that guy, or am I getting the guy that's drinking wine and getting humped by Izzy? I just, based off what I've seen, it seems like we're trending towards Paulo taking it seriously again. As far as Whittaker, what made Whittaker great was that when he first came up, he was the young middleweight in an era of kind of older guys, the Jacares, the Michael Bispings, et cetera, right? Like, he was actually supposed to fight Bisping, and he was like either pick him or dog odds against Bisping in Australia. Dude, I was going to hammer Robert Whittaker in that spot, man. And, he's always just been such a faster guy because he's a former welterweight coming up, and all the guys he was facing were way older than him. But now that he's gotten to kind of the newer school guys, don't get me wrong, he's beat some really good people, where it's the Jared Cannoniers and whatnot. But man, how many times can you climb that mountain, dude? Like, the fact that he even came back from that first Adesanya fight, got on a little win streak there, was beautiful. That second Adesanya fight was closer, but I'm starting to see a bit, not a huge decline. I don't think he's, wow, I was about to say, I don't think he's about to start getting dropped by jabs. And guess what happened his last fight, Andrew Gomez? He got dropped by a jab. So I do kind of think that Whittaker is slowing down a bit. I think at his best, he's incredible, super fast. I love his footwork, the way he sets up that high kick. His takedown defense is incredible. True ambassador for the sport. But I think, what is he about to make another title run now? Like you understand that Israel Adesanya is 2 champions removed, right? Like we've already had Strickland and Duplessis now. Israel is kind of an afterthought, and that's the era that Whittaker was already not being able to get belts back then. So, man, to break it down stylistically, though, man, I think that if Paulo comes out there with those punches and bunches, and he gets into the face of Whittaker, I think he can possibly look very good as a plus 190 dog.
Yeah, I actually feel a little bit differently here, and it's easy for me to say in hindsight, but I feel like Paulo Costa was never that great. And I know that's probably sounds like a crazy take, but if you look at it a little bit closer, he's one win. Like for actually, I was going to go down the route of saying he has one win since the pandemic, and it was against 80-year-old Luke Rockhold. But like just to run down this one by one, I bet him against Luke Rockhold, and I didn't like this is geriatric Luke Rockhold. Like prime Luke Rockhold probably gets on top of Costa and does bad things to him. But he made me nervous at times in that fight. And before that, like the whole Vettori debacle where he comes in overweight, he loses to Vettori, who's a good fighter, but he's not on the level of Robert Whittaker. Like we saw what happened when Robert Whittaker fought Vettori. Then obviously the Adesanya thing with the wine, he gets outclassed by Adesanya, and you could say, okay, there's no shame in that. Adesanya is the champ of the world at the time. Hard matchup for him. And then you have that Romero fight, which he looked really good in. So I almost feel like that Romero performance was more of an anomaly than like his normal or average. Because before that, I mean, it was like Uriah Hall, Wash Johnny Hendricks, Oluwale Bamboze, Gareth McLean. Like,
hey, real quick. Let me tell y'all something something about Gareth McClellan. Do you know what I'm about to say?
No, I have no idea.
Gareth McClellan, guess who he has a finish win over?
I don't know.
Dricus Duplessis.
Get out of here.
I'm serious.
Wow. I'm looking at
but I digress. Dricus was like 15 or some shit. Keep going.
That's hilarious. He'll have that. He'll be able to say he beat the champ forever.
Yeah. And you can do one of those proof that that Gareth McClellan is the GOAT type thing.
100%. But on the Whittaker side, he lost to Dricus in his last fight. And at the time, it was like, okay, Whittaker's a big favorite here. This is a big upset. We know now that it wasn't anything like that. Dricus Duplessis is the middleweight champ of the world. Like, excuse me, there's no shame in that loss. Dricus, obviously the champ. You go a little bit further back. In the time since Paulo Costa has fought like a couple fights, Whittaker has a ton. Like he beat Vettori, he beat Kelvin Gastelum, he beat Jared Cannonier, he beat Darren Till. His losses are to Adesanya and Dricus Duplessis. Like in his entire UFC run at middleweight, those are his 2 losses. Dricus, Adesanya. 2 of the champ and the former champ. So I think Whittaker should handle him in this matchup. Like I don't buy into the thing like, oh, he lost to Dricus, so he's washed. Like I think everyone would lose to Dricus, or at least could lose to Dricus. Like there's no one in the middleweight division that I'm like, oh, I would comfortably take over Dricus Duplessis. So I think Whittaker's gonna beat Costa. I think he's just a cleaner striker. He's a good counter striker. Maybe close early, but I feel like Whittaker's going to get his reads on Costa and be able to outpoint him, maybe even finish him late. But I'm picking Whittaker here. I think he gets back on track, even though, a lot of times when people kind of begin their fall, it's hard to get back. Whittaker's one of those guys I could see him inserting himself back into the mix again. Even when he lost to Adesanya the first time, I mean, he beat Till, Cannonier, and Gastelum to get another shot at Adesanya. So wouldn't shock me if he does that again. But yeah, I think he's going to win this fight.
No, fair enough. But it isn't just Dricus and Adesanya, though. I mean, like, if you watch the Till fight, Till dropped him. Cannonier had him wobbling bad in round 3. Now, granted, those guys are real hitters, so it's no shame in getting hit by them. But just saying, Paulo's a dangerous guy, too. So you just can't be surprised.
No. Agreed.
So featured bout in the welterweight division. We got Geoff Neal. He's 15-5, taking on Ian Machado Garry, who's 13-0. Currently, they got it. Ian Garry -210. The comeback on Geoff Neal's +180. So they were originally supposed to fight a few months back, and Now they're finally running it. Man, Ian Garry still undefeated overall and in the UFC. He's been a very bright prospect to watch. The fans completely turned against him. I was surprised to see a guy with Ian Garry's confidence turn his comments on silence, but that's neither here nor there. How do you think they match up?
Yeah, I'm picking Ian Garry here. I think that Neal's always dangerous, especially from the thought process that, you know, his name's Hands of Steel, but his high kicks are probably his best attribute. And an interesting dynamic here is if you look at the Magny fight, Ian Garry just absolutely abused that low calf kick. I mean, that was the story of that fight. He kicked him from the opening bell. You know, I have the stats in front of me. Let me see how many leg kicks he landed. He landed 43 of 43 leg kicks. And why I think that's interesting here is because Geoff Neal's a southpaw, so that dynamic's going to be different because they have opposing stances. But the reason I think Gary's going to win this fight, well, there's a few reasons, and I'll start with the fact that I just think he's overall a cleaner technical striker. Geoff Neal, he's in and out. He bounces around. He has that nice high kick, but I think Ian Garry has better hands. I like his distance management. Geoff Neal, you know, he had an accident a few years ago. He's been kind of hot and cold, but I kind of feel like he's been a little bit more cold than hot over the last few years. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the damage he took against Shavkat Rakhmonov, because he survived a lot in that fight. And, you know, that was a lot. You know, Shavkat landed over 100 strikes. He ended up finishing him in the third round. But if you look at Ian Garry's career, you know, Song Kanan dropped him with a right hand. But other than that, I mean, can you think of much damage Ian Garry's taken? Because I can't. I think maybe in his debut fight in the UFC, he maybe got hit a few times early against Jordan Williams. But other than that, I mean, his striking defense is really good. If you take a look at his striking metrics and how they match up with Neal's, Ian Garry lands 6.7 significant strikes per minute and absorbs 3.5, whereas Geoff Neal lands 5.2 and absorbs 5.6. So I think Garry, even though he did even though he got clipped by Khan Song, is a good defensive striker. I like his process. I like his risk management. I like that he's taken less damage than Neal. I think he's going to outclass him here. Curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, look, Geoff Neal, man, very fast southpaw. When he first came into the UFC, I felt like he was destined for great things, possibly even fighting for a title. I mean, the way he beat Bilal in like 2019 or 18, whenever that was, like that was a statement in itself. And unfortunately, he had a near-death experience. He had like sepsis and like congenital heart failure, like some like crazy shit. So the fact that he's even able to bounce back and just make the walk again, hey, credit to you, Geoff Neal. You're a bad boy. But the reality is, like you said, since that near-death experience, it's been hot and cold, hit or miss. You have these kind of listless performances like he had against Magny, even the win against Ponzinibbio, where it doesn't even look like a far cry of the Geoff Neal that we first saw, who was so fast, so dynamic. But then the Luque fight, I don't know if it was just a stylistic matchup thing. I don't know if he had his health in order that fight, but I felt like that was the closest step to the old Geoff Neal we used to see, the fight against Luque. That was like a little semblance of the Geoff Neal we used to know and love. The Shavkat fight was a great fight, but you got to understand, Geoff Neal came in 175 pounds for that fight. Not the best look. Took a shit. It was a great fight, but he took a shit ton of damage. So I just don't know. Like, it's hard for me to bank on guys that at this point are hot and cold. If this was the Garry prior to almost dying, the Geoff Neal prior to almost dying, not saying he'd win this fight, but I'd be more tempted to take a shot here. Machado, Garry, listen, say all you want about, you know, he's maybe not handling certain things as well as you'd expect him to, especially a guy with his confidence, putting his comments on, you know, turning off his notifications and his comments on silence and all that. You don't like, you know, Conor McGregor would never do that. Jamal Hill would never do that. Like, no real, like, elite mentality guy would do that. But at the same time, the kid can fight. And I really like his distance. I like his takedown defense from back in the regional days. He's been 5 rounds before. I like the mixing of levels of the kicks, whether it's he's talking about throwing body kicks in this one. Against D-Rod, he had a nice head kick. So yeah, and I feel like when you look at those fights against like Weeks and them and some of these other fights with lower opponents, Weeks didn't really want to fight him, man. Weeks just kind of, we were at that fight. Weeks just kind of tried to stall the entire time, pin him up against the fence. He still got 30-27. So I think that Machado Garry's the goods. But the thing about the Song Keenan fight, I even said it like in my breakdown, like Ian Machado owns this guy everywhere. It's just that Keenan Song, the only thing he's got is he's got heavy hands, and he does. He's got big power in his hands. He's dropped a lot of guys. He dropped Garry. Props to Garry for recovering there. It's just, I think that Geoff is going to have a hard time closing the distance on the longer guy here. And I think he might get intercepted by something when he does try to do that. And I'm also curious if there's going to be a lot of emotions and fighting uncharacteristic, but you can't really bank on stuff like that. So just stylistically speaking, I think that the range, the speed, and the consistency of Ian Garry is going to be the difference here. So for that reason, I'm going to pick him to win this fight. Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got Merab Dvalishvili. He's 16-4, taking on Henry Cejudo, who's 16-3. Currently, they got it. Wow, Merab. It just depends where you look. Minus 200. The comeback on Cejudo is plus 180. So, you know, Merab was minus 175 yesterday. So now that he's minus like 220, I should tip a minus 175 Merab ticket, you know what I'm saying, so I can fit in. But listen, man, this is an incredible matchup. Henry Cejudo was one of my money trains when he was, you know, doing his thing prior to the retirement. I mean, the way he looked against TJ Dillashaw, I know you were in attendance for that fight. The way he looked against Dominic Cruz, I mean, he looked like one of the best of all time. He is one of the best of all time. To win an Olympic gold medal, to win belts in 2 weight classes, defend both those belts, hey, dude, you can lose 10 fights in a row and you're in the Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned. So Henry Cejudo, always grateful for what he's done. And yeah, I love the guy. But the thing about it is, man, it seems like he's in a state of complacency, getting rid of coaches. Like, dude, when you watch, you heard of Neuroforce One, the strength and conditioning program that they got by Fight Ready?
No.
So, you know, the gym Fight Ready in Arizona?
Yeah.
So that's like the gym, the martial arts gym. But then they have a strength and conditioning program next to it called Neuroforce One, and they're like high tech on their science. They know the intricacies of things that I wouldn't even know the half of, and it's like real scientific how they measure like all his levels. And yeah, then they're doing all kinds of cutting edge techniques, right? So I would follow them, and like when Henry was fighting Cruz and TJ, and you saw the workouts he was doing, you saw the shape he was in, it was like, god damn, like this guy's unstoppable. But he's not working with those guys anymore now. I don't know how much truth there is to this, but people I know that live in Arizona where this guy lives say that, you know, he's just kind of training with his friends now. He doesn't have the coaches that brought him to the dance. He's kind of just, you know, like I said, a little bit of complacency, a little bit of stagnation. And that's not good because Merab is all in right now. Merab wants to be a champion. Merab's got that insane style where, you know how we talk about guys like, I don't know, a Bryce Mitchell or an Evloev where like, you know, they can attempt like 1 million takedowns and not get discouraged, right? But when we talk about that, man, we usually talk about, oh, okay, he attempted 10 to 12 takedowns, which is a lot, right? We're like, damn, that's great. Like, hey, that's all you had to say. This dude, Merab, attempted 49 takedowns against Piotr Yan. 49. And Piotr Yan's not some fucking walkover. To 50-45, a guy like that to get, and he scored 11 takedowns. He attempted over 400 strikes. Like, this guy just doesn't get tired, man. And with Cejudo, I love me some Cejudo, but he's not in the shape he was in during his championship run. And he already fights at a bit of a slower pace, kind of a measured pace. He doesn't put up those numbers you like. Obviously, he can mix in that disgusting inside. His inside trip is probably one of the best of all time. And when he gets on top, he's super heavy on top. And Merab has been taken down his fair share of time. So I'm not writing off that possibility, but I just think the in-betweens and all of that is where Merab is going to shine. And he is a guy that's ready for the step up in competition. You know, he's fought 2 former champs back to back. So why not make it a third? And then one more thing. You watch that fight between Henry and Aljo, and to a lot of people, it's like, wow, he went to a split with the champ, so he still got it. Dude, let me tell you something right now, guys. If this was the Henry that fought Cruz, him fighting Aljo, he would have starched Aljo. I truly believe that. And anyone can correct me. And I don't mean to be disparaging, but I've always kind of considered Aljo to be one of the more overrated champions we've had in the UFC. I mean, when you talk about champs that in round 4 and 5 consistently they're hanging on for dear life, like I just can't put Aljo up there with like some of the best of all time, despite what anybody says, despite any of the bullshit anyone says, because people will talk about how, well, Aljo broke the title defense record. Yeah, well, guess what? When Cruz was champ, Cruz would fight once every 4 years. When TJ was champ, he was testing positive for steroids. So like, of course, Aljo has the record for most title defenses, but it's only like 3, which is still great. But I'm saying people were acting like he was the John Jones of this division. And I thought it was just circumstantial, bro. So I was never, you know this from day one. I mean, I bet on Brian Caraway at plus 350 to beat Aljo. And I cashed, by the way. So I've always thought Aljo was super overrated. So for Henry to go to a split with him, like I said, people are going to view that as, wow, he went to a split with the champ off a layoff. I view it as, the Henry I know and love would have starched Aljo and made it look easy. The fact that Aljo was going out there and bullying the Olympic gold medalist, taking him down multiple times, not a good look. I think that even if Merab can't get the takedowns, I think he's going to attempt them over and over and over. And eventually he's going to fatigue Henry and get to him. So I see a decision win for Henry Cejudo. I see a decision win for Merab Dvalishvili. And even though the lines moved to minus 200, even though I could pull some fast bullshit like these other guys are doing and release a line that's been gone for a long time, I still think there's value at minus 200.
Yeah, this is a really fascinating fight, and I think Merab's going to win too. There's a lot to break down here, but I'll just start with the very broad, high-level breakdown. So Merab is 4 years younger than Henry. And when you think about age, there's like normal age and there's you've been wrestling your whole life age. Like Henry Cejudo won the Olympics like a couple decades ago. And so his body's been through the ringer. He retired at one point. You know, he was gone for years. He came back, and a lot of people, you know, it's important to note Henry was a 125 pounder for the majority of his UFC career. You know, he came up to 135, and I think he had a few matchups that were favorable for him, like Marlon Moraes, who ended up losing like 6-7 fights in a row or something like that. Dominic Cruz, which is a solid win, but it's a very different matchup from Merab. Aljamain Sterling could have gone either way. Again, different matchup than Merab. So he's only had 2 fights since 1/1/2020, which is, again, I'm always favoring the more active fighter. I shouldn't say always, but more often than not, I favor the more active fighter. I like activity, especially when it's someone who's Henry's age. And then you look at this from a perspective of, okay, what is Henry doing here? He's an Olympic gold medalist. Was the 125-pound champ. He was a 135-pound champ. Unless I'm mistaken, this is his first non-title fight since 2017 when he fought Sergio Pettis. And I'm 99% sure that was his most recent non-title fight. So it's like, where is his mind at? Like, I tend to think he's coming back for a paycheck. I know he loves competing, but to your point, is he really going into the gym, doing the hardest workouts, going every single day, pushing himself to the brink? Or is it just like, you know, I'm going to try to win this fight. I'm going to try to make some more money. You know, he probably gets paid $500K or whatever. I'm going to try to make another $500,000. Give it my all. If I win this fight, I'll get another title fight. If not, then that's probably it. And then on the Merab side, they call him the machine. I was going to say he's a machine, but he's the machine. He's beaten in his last 2 fights Petr Yan, Jose Aldo, 2 former champs. Before that, obviously he beat Moraes also, which I talked about isn't like the best win on his resume, but like the Yan fight, I think you bet on Yan. I did also, and it was when I did your show at the end of the year, I mentioned that as my worst bet. And that's just a mistake I won't make again. He went out there, he took Jan down 11 times. He controlled him for almost 7 minutes.
Attempted 49 takedowns.
Attempted 49 takedowns, which is unheard of. And what doesn't get talked about that fight is he outlanded Jan at distance 129-66, which is like incredible. And if you take a look at their career striking metrics, if you take a look at Merab and Henry's striking metrics, Merab lands 4.46 strikes per minute and absorbs 2.41. And Henry lands 3.9 per minute and absorbs 3.1 per minute. But if you go even deeper, the last time Henry has like really outlanded someone at distance other than like, I don't know, the Cruz fight, it's really just the Cruz fight. Sterling outlanded him at distance. Marlon Moraes outlanded him at distance. And if you go back even further, Demetrius Johnson outlanded him at distance by a lot. He outlanded him obviously in both their fights, but the first one was very quick. I just think that Merab is, at this point, he's just a better fighter, and he is freak show cardio. He's bigger. He's 4 inches longer. He's younger. I just give him so many advantages here, especially given where they're at in their careers. I even think this would be a hard matchup for Henry in his prime. I really do. I mean, Henry, like I said, moved up from 125, got Marlon Moraes, Dominic Cruz, and then lost a split to Aljo. And it's just like, I think Merab's on another level. I think he gets it done here. And I don't want to say I can't see like a win condition for Henry, because I obviously can. Like, it just feels like a Henry win is pretty slim margins. And whereas I think Merab could, if you told me someone's going to win like a dominant 30-27, I could really only see it being Merab. So I think he gets it done. I think this line could be a little wider also.
Now, next up in the middleweight division, we got a matchup between Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. He's 11-2, taking on Roman Kopylov, who's 12-2. Currently, they got it. Anthony Hernandez -210. The comeback on Roman Kopylov is +180. So Anthony was -150, then he was -170, and now he's -210. So now is probably a good time to tip a -150 bet on Hernandez. What do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, so I don't know what else to say other than I think this is a slam dunk. I really do. I think that the true price of this fight, it might sound crazy, I think Fluffy Hernandez should be a -350, -400 favorite here, for a number of reasons. But let's just start from the dynamic of this fight. Roman Kopylov, he's a good striker. I don't think he's a great striker. If you take a look at the Claudio Ribeiro fight, really close before the knockout. I think technically Ribeiro won the first round on 2 scorecards, and none of us are sitting here saying Ribeiro is a world beater. The Frem fight, again, he was a big favorite in that fight. Josh Frem, not the best caliber fighter, but even that at distance was only 47-37. And then if you look a little bit further back in Roman Kopylov's career, he got submitted by Carl Roberson. He was a huge underdog against Albert Duraev. Duraev won a unanimous decision, controlled him for over 5 minutes. And then his wins are Alessio Di Chirico, Puna Soriano, Claudio Ribeiro, and Josh Frem. Now he's getting a fight with Fluffy Hernandez, who's had a very interesting career trajectory. He started out in the UFC 1 and 2. And this is funny. 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, I actually cashed an underdog bet on Marcus Perez against him, which is really funny to think about in retrospect, because now I rate Fluffy Hernandez really, really high. He has some really solid wins, whereas I feel like Kopylov doesn't have any of those. So, like, for example, Jung Young Park, he took him down 6 times. He submitted him. Rodolfo Vieira, we saw what he's capable of this past weekend. Elite BJJ player. Rodolfo is a huge favorite. Took him down. Fluffy just put pace, cardio. And then you have the Barry Alt performance, the Frem performance. I said Frem is not great, which he's not. But then you get to a guy like Edmund Shabazian, who at one point people were thinking that Edmund was future champ material. And Fluffy goes out there, takes him down 6 times. Basically, I don't want to say he made him quit, but by the end of that fight, it looked like Shabazian didn't want to be there anymore. He got him out of there. And I have a lot to say about this fight, so I'm just going to – my thoughts are all over the place, but hopefully people get something out of it. In general, give me pressure cardio pace wrestlers over kickboxers that are going to put their back up against the fence. Hernandez took down Edmund Shabazian 6 times. He took down Barlow 8 times. He took down Fremd 8 times. He took down Jung Young Park 6 times. I haven't seen anything from Kopylov that makes me think that he has any real probability to win this fight outside of a first round knockout. I think that Hernandez has a huge cardio edge here. You could find multiple Kopylov fights where he literally has his hands on his knees in the octagon because he's tired. And Hernandez isn't going to stand at distance and strike with him. Hernandez is going to put him to the fence. He's going to shoot. He's going to hold his head on the ground. He's going to tire him out. I think he's going to wear on him. I think he's going to finish him. And again, people will watch the Kopylov versus Fremd fight and say, oh, Kopilov's takedown defense got better. He was just fighting Josh Fremd, and that's not to disrespect Josh Fremd, but even Fremd got in on his legs, and I'm like, if Fluffy puts him in that – I mean, we saw what Fluffy did to Fremd. Like, the levels of grappling between them are not even remotely close. There's a huge cardio edge. Could Kopylov knock him out early? I guess. I just don't think it's very like I think it's a low percentage outcome. You know, the 2 times or I think 2 times Hernandez has been finished. Definitely against Kevin Holland was a knee to the body. You could say he's a little bit soft to the body. And Kopylov has good body kicks, but how long is that fight really going to be at range for? Hernandez is going to get in his face. He's going to shoot takedowns, and he's going to keep shooting and keep grappling until they blow the whistle or the ref pulls him off of him. So I love Hernandez in this spot. This is a really strong opinion for me. I think that he should be a big favorite here. And just, you know, there's certain stylistic matchups that I've done better with historically in the past. And this just fits the criteria of a spot that I do well on. So I'm planting my flag. I like Anthony Hernandez a lot here. And I apologize for ranting, but it's not very often that I have a take with this conviction. So I just wanted to share where I'm coming from.
No, of course. And I mean, it's important to give all the reasons. And these guys are interesting because when they first came to the UFC, they both had a couple hit or miss performances. You know, Roman getting submitted by Carl Roberson. The Jiraiya fight was not the best look. You look at Fluffy, you know, I remember when Marcus Maluko dangled off his neck. Even his win against Jang Young Park, he got hurt really bad early in the fight. The Kevin Holland fight didn't even stand a chance. So to go from that, and then same with Roman, to where they are now, meeting for, you know, a top 15 spot, you love to see it. And it's just polar opposite styles. Roman, man, he's looked a lot more dangerous than he initially did. And obviously I love his punching. I love his kicking. It's just about what's his takedown defense like now. It's been a few years since those losses, but he hasn't really had the proper opponent to test him there. I mean, Josh Fremd is a D3 wrestler, which I respect, but right?
I never knew that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's a D3 wrestler. But the thing about it is Josh Fremd, with his body style, that kind of like, what is he, like 6'4", 6'5", like lanky, like it's just a different body style to Hernandez. Hernandez is a little bit more thick, a little bit more lower body under him, which is gonna, you know, obviously translate to more takedowns. And then you mentioned all the takedown stats that Anthony's been putting up. How about the fact that he submitted Rodolfo Vieira? Now, you could say, oh, but Rodolfo gassed, but I don't give a fuck if he gassed or what the case was. You submit Rodolfo Vieira, hey, like, much respect, man. Like, Rodolfo could have not tapped and went to sleep, and it would have still been bragging rights. But like to make Rodolfo tap, like, hey, dog, like that's legit. I love this kid's Anaconda, Guillotine, Darce. All his front headlock series are very on point. And yeah, to me, it's just kind of like more show me from Roman, like show me that, because like Roman's like our kind of like perspective on him went from like bum to world beater, right? Like, and I don't mean that we view him as a world beater. What I mean is that these last few performances have just been, he's like on like a 5-fight KO streak. Like, so he's been running through people. Like, that's how you rebound from those first 2 fights where we thought, okay, yeah, this ain't gonna pan out. This is one of those fraud Russians. And dog, he can bang. And Anthony is really come into his own, developed his own style, which is a style that wins a lot of fights, especially when you talk about someone else on this card like a Merab, etc. Anthony's got the middleweight version of that. So yeah, I'm rooting for you. I know you're big in this spot. And I just want to kind of sit back and watch if Roman's made those kind of improvements. Because I do think if he can stuff, it will be interesting on the feet. Like I truly believe that. It's just you're convinced that, bro, he ain't stopping shit. So I'm excited about this. I'll go with Anthony as well, and let's see what happens.
Yep, should be fun. I mean, I could hardly sleep at night. I'm so excited for this fight. Literally, bro. It sounds crazy, but like I've been thinking about this fight since they announced it. And I've just been waiting to sink my teeth in, and now it's fight week, and it's on a big card, and there's a lot of fights to be excited about. But for me, I mean, I'd buy the pay-per-view alone for this one, just because it's not every day that I have conviction like this. And not only is it not every day, I mean, there could be a year that goes by where I don't have as a strong an opinion as I do right now. So it excites me. I love talking about it, but like you said, there's a lot of good fights on this card. So hit me with what's next.
Absolutely. And hopefully this hits you with like 10 steak dinners in a row, because you deserve it, my man. So next up in the strawweight division, we got Amanda Lemos. She's 13-3, taking on Mackenzie Dern, who's 13-4. Currently, they got it Amanda Lemos minus 125. The comeback on Mackenzie Dern is plus 105. Interesting, because after Mackenzie Dern's performance over Angela, I was thinking like, hey, this might be Mackenzie 2.0. That pace she put up was just relentless. All 5 rounds, I was like, okay, like she learned from her Yan Xiaonan loss. She learned from her Marina Rodriguez loss. I was like, okay. So then I bet her in the Andrade fight, which was like one of the worst bets of that year. And little did I know, I found out after I placed the bet that she parted ways with her coach, Jason Perlow, the guy that had like made those big improvements in Mackenzie's game, where you saw that amazing performance against Angela Hill. Perlow also responsible for UFC legends Bisping, BJ Penn, currently the boxing coach of Marlon Chito Vera, who's about to fight for a world title. So I was thinking Mackenzie was on the up, and apparently she left Perillo. I don't know the whole story. If someone knows, let me know in the comments. Did she fire Perillo? Because we're on the street from like back in the day, like even in the MMA lab days, was that Mackenzie was that super talented fighter, but just didn't have the work ethic. Like I remember I heard a Sean O'Malley interview, and someone was asking him about who he's been training with, and they're like, oh, what about Mackenzie Dern? And he's like, Mackenzie at the gym? Like, so she's like one of those talented people that doesn't work that hard type ordeal. And then with Lemos, she brings kind of a different kind of power to the women's divisions, let alone at strawweight, which you don't often see women knocking other women down and out. So you love to see that stuff, but then you see her get standing arm triangled in a fight, and like little things like that. And even I know she got submitted again earlier. Like again, was it Leslie Smith a few years back? I know it was like in 2 different weight classes. Yeah. It was standing elbows TKO actually. And I know that was like 2 weight classes up, but just say she's kind of like hit or miss. Like when she can bully you, when she can be like the alpha in there, like these girls don't like that power, but I have questions about the grappling. Obviously, that you saw that clinic Yan Xiaonan put on her. And while Lemos could absolutely drop Mackenzie, could do some stuff to her standing, it might be a 1 takedown situation. It might be a 1 submission attempt situation for Mackenzie to win. I was so excited about Mackenzie working with Jason Perillo, because can you agree with me? Despite it being Angela Hill, that performance was a big step in the right direction, right? 100%. And to go from that, and then you leave the coach that got you to that level, and now you're training with your boyfriend in your garage and doing the whole bit. It's just hard to have any confidence. But stylistically, if Mackenzie doesn't get flatlined, it might only take 1 opportunity on the ground to finish this. So I'm going to lean with Mackenzie a little bit, but after that last one, show me, girl,
Yeah, it's a really interesting fight. I expected to like Lemos a lot when I went in the tape, because, I backed Andrade against Dern, and I felt like that fight was even easier than I anticipated it. And Dern's had a lot of the same problems for a long time. Her jiu-jitsu is second to none. She bites down on the mouthpiece, and she's aggressive, so she checks that box. Her wrestling's no good, and her striking isn't very good. Like technical wise, when she strikes, she bites down, she throws, she can land some shots, whatever. But her technical striking isn't anything to write home about, and she hasn't really improved her wrestling ever. And if I was like her coach, I'd say forget the striking. Like, you learn how to wrestle, you're going to submit everyone in the first round. Like, one takedown, it's probably going to be the round, if not the fight. But she had zero answer for Andrade's leg kicks, like zero. She would just let her kick her in the leg, pick her leg up, and that was kind of it. So I feel like if Lemos came into this fight with like this really smart, sharp game plan of, I'm going to stay upright, I'm going to kick her leg, I'm going to circle, I'm going to stay upright, I'm going to kick her leg, I'm going to circle, she could look like a huge favorite here. But what's concerning for me on the Lemos side is when she fought Zhang, and I know Zhang is the best in the world. Like, I'm not saying Dern and Zhang are the same. So just, if you're watching this, bear with me here through this comparison. And I don't want you to jump to conclusions and say, oh, he thinks Dern is Zhang.
They're going to jump to conclusions even after you explain your thoughts.
So what I'm going to say here is Lemos was almost like flopping to her back against Zhang. Like, it's not that Zhang took her down, because Zhang's a tank. Zhang's a tank. She's a really good fighter. She's the best fighter. Zhang, it's not that Zhang took her down. It's the way that she was ending up on bottom. Lemos, they'd be in these positions, like 50-50 positions on the feet, and Lemos would almost flop to her back. Like, I almost couldn't believe it when I was watching the tape, and I was like, is this just a mental lapse? Is this the pressure of a title fight? Is this because it's Zhang? Or is this just, I don't know what it was, but that really is what dissuaded me from backing her in this spot. I think this is as close to a coin flip fight as you could really get, because I could see a scenario like either girl could look like a big favorite here. If Lemos does her flopping to the back thing, Dern could submit her anytime she gets on top of her. She could ride her out for the round. But if Lemos comes in there and she fights smart and she prioritizes leg kicks, she could chew up Dern's leg. She could crack her on the feet. Lemos hits very hard. And, Dern's coming off a knockout loss to Andrade. So it's a really tough fight for me. I'm staying away from this one. I'm very interested to see Lemos' game plan and interested to see how Dern adjusts from kind of just getting dominated in her last fight. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I think it's a really good matchup. Like, I'm glad it's just one of those fights where I'm glad they put these two together, because whoever loses this fight is, going to drop out of any kind of top contention, and whoever wins kind of stays a little bit relevant. I know Lemos isn't getting another shot at Zhang anytime soon, but at least whoever wins this fight is going to hang around like the top 5, top 7 in the division, where I think whoever loses is kind of done forever. So I'm excited for this one.
Now, next up in the heavyweight division, we got a matchup between Marcos Rogerio de Lima Pesao. He's 21-9, taking on Justin Tafa, who's 7-3. Currently, they got it. Marcos Rogerio de Lima Pesao -140. The comeback on Justin Tafa is +120. I know historically you've had a really good read on Marcos Rogerio de Lima Pesao, so tell us your opinion on this.
Yeah, this is funny, and I had no idea, but I was looking back at my Bet MMA. I'm pretty sure I've bet on De Lima more than any fighter since I started betting. Isn't that pretty crazy?
That is.
I'll run through it real quick if you're interested. I bet him against Adam. I don't even know how to say his name.
Vicerek.
Vicerek. Do you remember that card? That was when pretty sure that was the night Daniel Cormier fought Derek Lewis.
Yeah.
So I bet him there. I bet him against Ben Sassoli, who he beat. I bet him against Ben Rothwell as an underdog, who he beat. I bet him against Ivanov, who I thought he beat, but he didn't. I bet him against Arlovsky, who he beat. I bet him against Waldo Cortez Acosta, who he beat. And I finally got the hammer dropped on me. I bet him against Derek Lewis. I beat the line by $1, got knocked out. I think he's going to win this fight. And, there's definitely some concerns when you're fighting a guy like Justin Tafa, right? Because his power is really, really good. He's a big left hand. But I think there's a lot of holes in Tafa's game. His takedown defense and his grappling are still pretty big question marks, which is funny considering the fact that he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 UFC fights. This is his 9th UFC fight, and we haven't even seen much of him in the grappling department, which is just hilarious. I mean, if you look at his last 4 fights, Harry Hunsucker, Parker Porter, Austin Lane, and Austin Lane. So I think some people are looking at this matchup and they're saying, Tafa's on this little winning streak. But if you peel back the onion a little bit, he has a 1 minute and 22-second knockout, a 1 minute and 5-second knockout, a 1 minute and 54-second knockout. If you go back a little further, he's losing decisions to Jared Vandera and Carlos Felipe, who aren't even UFC caliber. And he was even knocked out by Jorgen De Castro, who's also not UFC caliber. I think Rogerio de Lima is better everywhere. He's definitely going to have to mind his P's and Q's because Tafa could knock anybody out. You know, de Lima's coming off being knocked out. He's getting up there in age. But Tafa, I think if you can extend this fight past round one, like anytime, I mean, let's look at when the 2 times Tafa's been pushed past round one in his UFC career. He's lost both those fights to Carlos Felipe and Jared Vandera, which isn't exactly a great look. And on the flip side, you have de Lima. He's all the grappling upside. And one thing I'll say from the Tafa case, remember earlier I mentioned with Ian Garry and Geoff Neal, the dynamic with the leg kicks because of the southpaw stance. This is the same thing here. Rogerio de Lima, if you take the Acosta fight, for example, he was chewing up Waldo Acosta's lead leg that entire fight. That's not necessarily going to be there here because Tafa is a southpaw. And I don't even know if he's going to want to risk, you know, dropping his hand, throw a leg kick or something because of that power that's coming back the other way. But I'm picking de Lima here. I think he has more ways to win. He is grappling upside. And I think the longer this fight goes, the better for him.
I mean, I think you have a very legitimate case. I want to make the case for Tafa. Hear me out. Okay, so one thing we got to consider is that Tafa came into the UFC at only 3-0. Okay, yeah, so he was just a spring chicken. Whereas when Rogerio de Lima came into the UFC, he was already 11-2, right? So 11-2 compared to 3-0. I mean, Rogerio already had a lot of experience. This dude Tafa had to learn on the job. So, you know, when he's had some ugly losses, like 9 times out of 10, you lose to Jared Vandera, and I'm never gonna even consider picking or betting you and this and that. But the thing is, he was like 4-2, and Jared Vandera was 11-5. So he had like 2 to 3 times the experience as him. And when you look at a guy that has to learn on the job, like sometimes you're going to lose the guys that down the line in your prime version, you'll probably beat, but he just wasn't quite ready for them back then. But basically, I've always viewed Tafa the same way. It kind of reminds me of just that Mark Hunt style, you know, same body type, same power, same big left hook, elbows off the clinch. Takedown defense, probably not the best, but at least they're working on it. So maybe it's improved a bit. So it's just about now that, you know, Tafa's approaching that, you know, 10 pro fight mark. That's when you're going to start to see these improvements. Cause, you know, he's not a kid. He's 30, which is still, you know, for a heavyweight, that's actually really young. Cause you see heavyweights like hit their prime in like 38. Like the champ, John Jones, is 37, right? Stipe, who was the champ before that, is like what, 39, 40, you know what I'm saying? So like heavyweights, one of those weight classes where they're like late bloomers. Here's my thing with De Lima. So De Lima is a guy that back in the day I used to fade regularly. Like against Nikita Krylov back in 2015, against Antigulov back in 2016, because he used to be a guy that he'd like tap out to chokes that weren't even locked in. Now, granted,
real quick, can I just interrupt you? I love hearing when you like mention fights that you bet on from back in like 2016, because I feel like I've been around so much longer than 99% of the people that are like in the space, and you've been around even longer than that. So I always love just like reminiscing, like, oh, back 5 years ago I bet on this, or when in your case, what, 8 years ago now I bet on that. It's just funny hearing it.
It's crazy, dude. But here's the thing. I noticed a big uptick in his toughness. Let me explain what I mean. So he used to tap out to things that weren't even locked in, against Antigulov, against Krylov, like go pull up those fights. But then you fast forward to his Romanov fight in 2020, and like he let Romanov straight up put him to sleep with that forearm. Now, granted, it's embarrassing, it was a forearm choke, but still, he let Buddy put him to sleep. So I felt like mentally that was a step in the right direction. Now, here's my thing. You know, I'm going to be hypocritical, because when I was talking about Volk, I'm not using the head kick knockout loss against Volk. But here, back in, I think late July, Derek Lewis it wasn't just, oh, he got caught. Like, didn't Buddy like get his teeth knocked out, and like a whole article came out about how like dude was struggling to eat and he was drinking out of a straw and he was doing the whole bit. So like, you take that into consideration, the recovery time, and then you're just jumping right back into camp. I don't know. Like, unless he's just wrestling off the bat, like, I think there's a chance he could get fucking flatlined here. So I get the reasoning for wanting De Lima, the experience, more ways to win, level of competition, et cetera, et cetera. It all makes perfect sense. But this is one where I will bring up the narrative. Like, because again, it wasn't just he got caught. Like, dude, like, I need to pull up the article. So Marcos, Rogerio, De Lima. I'm going to write teeth. Let's see what happens. So the thing said, my teeth are all loose. I can't eat anything properly. It is hard at the moment. And this was only a few months ago, bro. Like, so yeah, like when you're talking about horrific damage like that, and now you're coming back against a power puncher, look, you better hump those legs right away, my boy, or else like those teeth might get knocked out again. I'm actually going to go Tafa here. I didn't think I would do it. And I understand it might look square if he gets laid on for 15 minutes like Visharek did, but I'm going to go Tafa here. Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got a matchup between the Japanese prospect, Rinya Nakamura. He's 8-0, taking on Carlos Vera, who's 11-3. And currently, my friend, they have it. Listen to this. Rinya minus 1,000. The comeback on Carlos Vera plus 700. Look, Rinya, he can bang. He's got a nice Kimura, a nice wrestling series. He can go all 3 rounds. I like him. Vera, kind of one of those guys where like doesn't look the prettiest, not the most athletic. He's 36 years old, but he's like that guy that like you'll beat up on, and then like in the 3rd round he'll get like a submission, right? Like you'll be just beating the shit out of this guy, and then he'll pull off like a leg lock. Like he's like one of those guys, and I respect that style. And usually when he loses, I mean, he's been submitted his fair share of times, but usually when he loses, you know, he's getting grinded out. I mean, look, he's got some funky stuff on the feed, some opportunistic submissions, but you got to look at the regional scenes that he's been on. Now, granted, they're more impressive than I thought, because there are some LFAs and some Fury FCs. I was expecting mostly like the Latin regional scene, which is still emerging. But I think the odds are probably accurate. Like even if Rinya can't finish him, I think he can neutralize him. So I'm going to go Rinya.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say here. I think Rinya is better everywhere, more explosive, stronger, better striker, better grappler, mismatch.
Now, next up in the light heavyweight division, we got 2 debutants. We got Mingyang Zhang. Am I pronouncing it right? Because last time I called her a Wiley Zhang, and people like freaked out and called me like they said all kinds of crazy shit. Anyways, we got Mingyang Zhang. He's 16-6, taking on Brendson Ribeiro, who's 15-5. Currently, they got it. Mingyang Yang. Sorry. They got Mingyang Zhang minus 130. The comeback on Brendson is plus 110. Yeah, this should be exciting. Let's leave it at that. This should be very, very exciting. Probably going to stand and bang until one man falls. Both guys, I know Brendison's been stopped a few times, but granted, against real competition. Other buddy has not just been stopped. He's been stopped by the person that Andrew Gambis called. Look at this guy. He wants me to stop the podcast. Bro, there's a couple more fights and then I'll be done. All right, I promise you. And I even walked him before the show, fed him everything, but you know he's spoiled. So, but Mingyang Zhang didn't just get finished by anybody. He got finished by the Andrew Gambis's Jobber of the Year, Askar Mozharov, by knockout. Now, granted, the kid was like 19. We'll give him a pass, but I think Brendison's been fighting the better level of competition. You know, he's been going over to Shuto in Brazil, to Fight Nights Global in Russia. He's been fighting real dudes. He's been stopped a few times, but he trains out of a great camp at Evoluciao Thai, you know, like with my boy Trinaldo, Neto BJJ. Well, Neto BJJ is now at ATT, but prior to that, he was there. I mean, if you're giving me a Brazilian versus a Chinese dude, unless this Chinese dude is like God's gift to fighting, I'm going with the Brazilian dude. And they got similar records, similar styles. I just think that Zhang is too open to be hit. Not that, you know, Brendison isn't, but I just think Brendison's going to knock this guy out. That's it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's a hilarious fight. Both guys debut. I'm pretty sure both guys cashed as like huge underdogs too in their last fight, at least in their last couple fights. But I slightly favor Brendson as well. You know, just give me Brazil over China and MMA in general, but also, you know, I hope I'm saying his name right. Brendson Ribeiro. He's also 6 inches longer. I think he probably is a better training situation. Don't get me wrong. Either one of these guys could knock the other out, and I definitely don't recommend going and placing any big wagers here. But I am picking Ribeiro here. I think the length. I think probably a better training situation. I think probably a little bit better process as well. So I'm going to go with him, but it's a tough one.
But speaking of Brazil and China, when it comes to the women, though, I got the Chinese women all day over the Brazilian women. Give me Zhao Nan and Wai Li all day. But the males, different story. Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got Josh Quinlan. He's 6-1. He's really 7-1 because he knocked out that guy on Contender Series, but, you know, he tested positive for steroids. And it's not the first time he's done that either, my friend. Taking on Danny Barlow, who's 7-0, representing the South here in Memphis, Tennessee. Currently, they got it. Danny Barlow -185. The comeback on Quinlan's +160. What I like about Quinlan is that he's a very heavy hitter. Like, he's got that stupid death touch. He's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Haven't seen him use it too much. That might be a good idea here because Barlow's got the length. Barlow's got the volume. And what I really like about Barlow, he's kind of green. He's only 7-0, but he's got a lot of attributes that I like. He switches stances. He's very sharp. He's super athletic. And he seems like he's got a good process about his game. He's very cerebral. He just needs to cut that stupid fucking thing off the back of his head. And if he does that, it could be bright skies. Give me Danny Barlow here.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on this one either. Barlow, you know, he had that nice performance on the Contender Series. I didn't love his tape before that, and I also don't know how much I could take from a minute knockout, but Quinlan's another guy who I was not really high on coming into the UFC. You know, he knocked out Jason Witt, which Augusta Wynn could have done the same thing, and then he dropped the ball against Trey Waters. So
I got you over Jason Witt.
I appreciate that. Hopefully one day we will never see that happen. But yeah, this is just a complete pass for me. I guess if you put a gun to my head, I'll take Quinlan at dog odds because
really?
I'm not feeling strong on either side. So in a fight where I'm not confident, I'll take the plus money, but I'm not going anywhere near this fight.
Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got Val Woodburn. He's 7-1, dropping to welterweight because he fought Bo Nickel at 85's last, taking on Oban Elliott, who's 9-2. Leo's barking. Does that mean Val Woodburn's live here? Currently, they got it. Oban -300. The comeback on Val just depends where you look, all the way up to +260 in some spots. Listen, my thing with Oban, I think that he's an incredible talker and he's a great trash talker. Comes from Wales, so he's got the accent. He's got an exciting fighting style. But this guy is a big-time knockout waiting to happen. He's already been knocked out twice, but I'll give him credit. That guy he beat on Contender Series was legit. Remember the kid Robert, the Polish guy that just debuted against Ihor? So that dude, Robert got knocked out by the Brazilian that Oban beat on Contender Series. So that's interesting. But Oban's like one of those kind of gritty, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an attritional based fighter. Like, he's not the most athletic, he's not the most skilled, but like, you slow down against a guy like them, he's gonna put it on you late. And that's what happened in that last fight. But man, he's so hittable, a knockout waiting to happen. Val Woodburn, I don't know much about him. He was not supposed to be in the UFC, but Bo Nickel's original opponent pulled out. Let me look up who that was. Oh, Trey Sean, which he's fucking known for.
He was supposed to be on this card, right?
And he pulled out of that too. Like, listen, firstly, Trey Sean doesn't claim Georgia. He claims South Carolina. So don't call him one of my Georgia boys. I do root for him because, I mean, I called some of his fights in the NFC, and I want to see guys from the South do well. But the truth is, my boy Trey Sean pulls out of more fights than he takes. So, yeah, come on, Trey Sean. Get it together, my boy. I don't know much about Val Woodburn, but what I know about Oban is he will break you down the stretch if if there's any kind of cardio concern. Val is dropping to 70s. I just don't know enough about Val, and I cannot wait to fade Oban. I just don't think there's the time. Let's go Oban.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Oban wins this, but I'm looking forward to fading him as well. I do think Val back at his normal weight of 170 is probably he'll look better than he did against Nickel. Obviously, that fight never really played out, but I still think he's probably rightfully the underdog here.
Yeah. Now, last but not least, in the flyweight division, we got Natalia Silva's. Oh, I was gonna say Natalia Silva's daughters, but you know what's interesting? Both these ladies arguably beat Macy Barber, and they both lost to her. But we got Andrea Lee. She's 13 and 8, taking on Miranda Maverick, who's 12 and 5. Currently, they got it. Miranda minus 190. The comeback on Andrea plus 165. You know, I'm not a big Andrea fan, but at the same time, Miranda Maverick, I've expected a little bit more development than I've gotten from her. Look, she's physical. She's actually pretty intelligent. Doesn't she like have like some like biochemical engineering degree or some shit like that? Like she's a smart chick. And she's had some good performances here and there, but also a couple of hit and miss ones along the way too. Andrea Lee definitely seems like she's on the way out, but at her best, decent striking, you know that. I've always had an issue with her takedown defense, like even back when I saw her fight Montana De La Rosa and Andrea won that fight. Like there were spots where it was like, man, this is ugly, other people are going to take advantage. You've seen fighters like Lauren Murphy take advantage. So I think Miranda's catching her at a good time. It was just, I'm not trying to lay no minus 190 here, so to me it's a pass.
Yeah, pass for me also. I felt like Lee looked significantly declined in her last fight, even though like we know Silva is a good prospect. It didn't even really look like she was in that fight. So if there were different circumstances, I might take the dog shot on her here because, you know, I cashed Cejudo Vicious as a big dog against Maverick. I'd be looking to do the same here, but it's a pass for me just given how she's looked recently.
Well, Andrew, before we got to get out of here, we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So I'm going to go first. What is the fight to watch for UFC 298? Besides the main event, besides the co-main event, we got to go with the feature bout between Geoff Neal and Ian Garry. I mean, Ian Garry has been the talk of the town and not for the best reasons the last few months. And this is coming off a guy who is undefeated as a pro, undefeated in the UFC. He's climbing up the rankings to get to the top 10. And he's taking on a guy in Geoff Neal who's been in there with everybody, has had some incredible performances along the way, has been kind of hit or miss since his near-death experience. And it's just intriguing. You saw the mug shot that Ian Garry put on the shirt. And then after that, people have been shitting all over Ian Garry. So now they want Geoff Neal to be the guy to humble him. And it's just going to be an exciting fight. Two dynamic strikers. Let's see who the better man is. So for that reason, Garry versus Neal is my fight to watch, Andrew.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And, you know, just for being different sake, I'll go with Merab versus Henry Cejudo because I think the winner is going to get a title shot at 135. And you got Henry's incredible wrestling pedigree against Merab, who's a cardio and pace machine. So I think that's my choice.
And for me, my fighter to watch, I said no main event, but I lied. It's got to be Ilia Topuria. Listen, representing Spain. And this is a guy who not just has the skills, but he also has the way he's been talking. And a lot of people are seeing it as like arrogance. I really see it as confidence. Like to me, I try to kind of like find the distinguishing point between the two, between just arrogance and delusion, like Jay Perrin, versus like true confidence, like this kid, Ilia Topuria. So I really think he's the goods. And man, he's not just fighting anybody. He's fighting arguably the best featherweight of all time. And if he can pass this, there's a new legacy incoming, man. So, and a first ever champ from Spain, which is cool too. So for that reason, Ilia Topuria is my fighter to watch.
Yeah. And I'm going to go with, I mean, obviously that's a great choice. I'm going to go with Fluffy Hernandez. I think this is a statement here. I don't think it's a competitive fight. I think he's probably going to get, you know, he's going to be in that conversation for getting a top 10 fight next.
Yes, sir. Well, Andrew, we did it. It's going down this Saturday night live in Anaheim, California. To everybody that checked this out, thank you so much. Leave me a comment, a like, a share if you feel so inclined. Make sure you follow my boy Andrew at Bets and Picks MMA. Also his podcast, The Magic and Andrew MMA Betting Podcast. Definitely check that out too. And yeah, you can find all this stuff on his socials. Anything else you want to tell the fans before we get out of here?
No, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and enjoy the fight Saturday.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Andrew. Thank you to the fans for all your support. Truly, truly appreciate it. Would not be here without you guys. I truly, sincerely hope you guys love these fights as much as I hope to love them. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.